Right, good morning, everybody. Another warm welcome to yet another Wednesday webinar. Great to have you with us. Apologies if you were expecting Stephen Finnegan. Unfortunately, we've had to find a replacement. We're really looking forward to Stephen's talk, but we'll have to get him on another time. But at the last minute, very, very kindly, we had Vasilis step in from OneClickLCA, and we came up with a brand new title for you, albeit around embodied carbon. So the same kind of topic, just a slightly kind of different angle on it. We'll get into the kind of the detail of what we're discussing in a minute, and we'll introduce Vasilis. But as the title suggests, we're looking at early stage embodied carbon optioneering and looking at OneClickLCA and Grasshopper and how those interrelate and how you can get a more detailed feel for the embodied carbon distribution through the construction at those very early kind of concept stages before you move on to detailed design. But before we do that, again, for those who are watching the recording of this and who aren't on MESHWORK already, do join the platform. A huge amount of benefits and a fast growing community. So do sign up, it's completely free, loads and loads of things to talk about. All of these videos that we're recording go straight up there the same day. We're trying to share as much content and as much relevant information as we can do with you guys to get the discussion going about sustainable building design. There's a lot to do. So without further ado, just a quick 30 seconds, then we'll get into the topic. Again, for those of you who aren't familiar with what Mesh Energy do, we're independent and holistic energy consultants. Primarily, we're working with design teams and we work with a huge amount of architects to try and make the sustainable design process as simple and as effortless and as meaningful and as cost effective as possible to make sure, whether it's your first project or whether it's your 50th, making sure that those projects are delivered for your clients, as I say, as easily and as effectively as possible. You're jumping through all the hoops that you need to, and we can really stretch if that's something that you're looking to do as well. Right, so as I say, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to introduce you to Vasilis. He's from OneClickLCA. OneClickLCA is professional software. We've got numerous licenses that we use within Mesh Energy to do some very, very detailed embodied carbon analysis as we get into the kind of the latter stages. But as I say, Vasilis is going to be talking to us about Grasshopper and OneClickLCA. And I'm going to shut up now, Vasilis, and I'm going to hand over to you. As normal here, we're going to do the presentation. We've actually got a kind of a case study, a live example that Vasilis is going to show us, and then we're going to open it up for questions. So do put your questions in the chat box. Do also try and keep your mics on mute as well, so everybody's getting the most from the talk as possible. So over to you, Vasilis, and I'll leave you to it.
Thank you, Jack. And good morning, everyone. And thank you for having me today here. I'm Vasilis. I'm an LCA specialist and business developer for OneClickLCA. And let me share my screen as well, because I forgot to do this. So there we go. As I said, I'm an LCA specialist and a business developer for OneClickLCA. And my topic for today will be early design optimization and how we can use the tools that OneClickLCA has to offer together with Grasshopper to evaluate projects at the earliest stages as possible, at least in terms of embodied carbon, that is. But a few words about us first, who we are. We are OneClickLCA. We have been developing software for which basically focuses on decarbonizing the construction industry. We're a global tool. We're being used in more than 100 countries. Right now, all over the world, we support pretty much every green certification and local compliancy module available out there. And we do have the largest construction materials LCA database available with more than 100,000 data points in the software. But how do we do this? How do we help in decarbonize the construction industry? Of course, we do have our software solutions for whole building life cycle assessments, infrastructure projects, products, and even greenhouse gas reporting. But also we do offer services such as trainings, consulting services, and of course, custom solutions whenever that's needed. And over the past few years, we've also been doing quite a lot of policy work, since we do work together with a few institutions and even governments to produce these guidelines. The reason I'm showing you this slide is just because I want to get a better understanding of where the entire value chain we fit in. So we work with engineers, architects, manufacturers, builders, investors, and even, as I mentioned before, institutions and governments. So either these people use our software, work together with us to set up their embodied carbon policies, and subsequently reduce their emissions. And what is our goal? Our goal is basically to integrate the entire ecosystem, to bring everything related to embodied carbon and sustainability into one platform. And how we do this is by, first and foremost, providing an intuitive platform to use. I mean, we will see it later, and I hope you will also find it intuitive. We do have global data, as I mentioned, so local data sets for pretty much every country in the world, even if there are no EPDs available. We do provide, again, global compliance with every certification scheme and certification scheme and compliance modules. And also we integrate with pretty much every major BIM, BEM software. Of course, that includes Revit, IES, Design Builder, Rhino, Grasshopper, and so on. And lastly, yes, we do embodied carbon reduction software, but we also tackle additional topics such as circularity assessments of projects and also life cycle costing. But well, enough for us, I suppose. Let's get into the topic of today's presentation, which is a life cycle assessment for buildings, and specifically early on. First things first, before we say anything else, the easier it is to make carbon understandable. Sorry, yes, the easier it will become to solve it, right? To reduce it, basically. So it is important to have the right tools at hand that allows you to visualize your results however way you want, and identify any potential hotspots within your projects. But the first question that we ask is, when can we do a life cycle assessment? And of course, we can do a life cycle assessment whenever we want. It doesn't matter if it's at the strategic phase, conceptual phase, design, even at the as-built part, we can do it. And having the right tools to achieve that is of utmost importance. So what do I mean by that? So for instance, doing an LCA in the design stage, when we have full developed design with hundreds and thousands of materials, it might become tedious to add each and every material one by one. So we have an integration with Revit, which you can basically pull data from Revit and materials and quantities and send them into OneClickLCA and do your life cycle assessment. In the conceptual stage, you can use Rhino or Grasshopper, whatever you might be using, together with some add-ons that we have developed, like Carbon Designer, to create bill of materials for your projects. In the as-built part, not the as-built, but in the construction phase, when we need to have EPD data available at hand, to be able to specify materials at a later point, this is something that you can also have through OneClickLCA, immediate documentation of all of your projects. But let's get to the important stuff, which is not when can we do an LCA, but when we should do it, right? And it is when we should do it is because when can we achieve the highest reduction potential, right? So different bodies, different organizations set different goals to reduce embodied carbon by whatever percent. For instance, the World Green Building Council has set the goal to be 40% by 2030. Others said to 50%, but all it matters is that it is high and we have to do it. And the point where we have the greatest ability to reduce our embodied carbon is the early phase. The early phases, so conceptual design and basically even the pre-strategic point. And that's because it is at this point that we can influence more parameters. We can influence the size of the project. We can influence material selection, shape. We can influence everything. And the main pillars behind early phase design are basically the fact that we can build less by maximizing the use of existing assets. We can build clever by optimizing material usage and design with low carbon materials. And of course, that is for the construction phase primarily, but the decision can be taken as early on. We can use low carbon construction technologies and also eliminate waste. So the earlier we are able to implement a life cycle assessment in our projects, the more reductions we can claim. And how we do this at OneClickLCA. I mentioned before this conceptual phase tool that we have, which is Carbon Designer. And Carbon Designer is an add-on that allows you to create a bill of materials for your project without even having a design yet. So this is why it's very, very useful for the early stages. And what data do we need to know for Carbon Designer? We need to know what building elements we must have available or what building elements we want to get a bill of materials for. What's the location of our project, the building type, the size of it, and the number of above ground floors. And that's basically all we need to know. And based on this information, we have an algorithm in place that will generate areas for every building element. And then, based on these areas, we will suggest some average material assemblies for you to use. The first implication of Carbon Designer, the first advantage, let's say, of Carbon Designer is that before you can even go into InDesign software, you can very quickly evaluate different construction scenarios. So let's say you want to compare a timber frame building with a metal frame building and whatever, you can just basically model this in Carbon Designer and very quickly see what is the scale of difference between those two options. Another thing that you can do with Carbon Designer, though, is that just because it gives us a bill of materials, we can use it to fill in any design gaps we might have. And what do I mean by design gaps? Especially in the early stages, we would rarely basically we would rarely design the insulation or the reinforcement or details like this. So with Carbon Designer, we can get all of this information directly into our projects without even having to calculate them in the BIM software that we might be using. That being said, there are only a few BIM tools that can actually help in the early phase that do not require a lot of details to fully function. And these are primarily Rhino and Grasshopper. Rhino is very more straightforward. Grasshopper might be more advanced, but both of them combined with Carbon Designer can help us reduce our embodied carbons at the early stages quite effectively. And at OneClickLCA, we have very recently released two integrations, one with Rhino and one with Grasshopper. The Rhino integration is fairly simple in the sense that all we can do is design a project, keep some materials to it, and get an estimate of our carbon emissions, but of our embodied carbon. But with Grasshopper, what we can do is a bit more advanced. We can set all the parameters that affect the design of our project, create numerous iterations, as many as we want, and also assign materials from OneClickLCA's database to the building elements and evaluate the embodied carbon of any iteration, basically. So this is why it's parametric. So this is basically what I just mentioned. We can define the parameters of our building, so we can design it however we want. Then we can assign to all the building elements the materials from OneClickLCA's database. And once we run the calculation, we can see in real time how changing these parameters right here might affect the embodied carbon of the design. So in that way, we can very quickly find different shapes that we can follow or different material choices and whatnot. And just as a more advanced case, let's put it like that, we can also use additional plugins from Grasshopper to optimize our design, whether that is Galapagos, which is an optimization plugin in Grasshopper that will allow us to set an embodied carbon target and optimize the shape until we reach that target, or even multi-criteria optimization using Octopus and introducing parameters such as cost, area, volumes, whatever we want, basically. I don't want to bore you anymore with the presentation. That's pretty much it with it. And I just want to spend the rest of the time with the softwares. And starting with OneClickLCA, what I want to show you just basically, I've created this this project for us today. And this project is actually from an actual case we had a few months ago. We were discussing how to design it and so on. And what was the idea? The idea was how we can combine the data we get from Grasshopper, from a test design from Grasshopper, with OneClickLCA. And while we're talking with the plugins developer, we came up with this very straightforward project, which is just a industrial warehouse, hence the title right here. And going into Rhino, I'm not going to go into the software anymore yet. First, we'll work with Rhino, and then we can go into the tool and see what we can do. So I'm going into Rhino, and I'm going to open Grasshopper here. And I have this script. And as you can see, this is the result of this design. These are my parameters right here, the ones that I've set. So whenever I change them, the design changes as well, as you can see. And what I'm going to do now is also actually we can see that we have all the different elements of this design separately classified here. So I have my slabs, my columns, and my external walls. Because again, this is a very early point. We don't have any more information available at hand. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to use OneClickLCA's plugin to assign materials to those building elements right here. And I will do this by using this component right here, this select LCA profile component. And all this does is it's basically a snapshot of our database, our entire database within that component, and you can search for a material through this. So for instance, let's say that I'm looking for a ready-mix concrete. And I can connect it to the search profile right here. And we can further refine our search if we want to by saying, okay, I want to have, of course, European data, my data source. You can choose whichever database you want to use. I'm going to use our own for this case. And now, right here, we can select the material that we want to use. So I'm just going to use this one for now. That's fine. And I'll do this 2 more times for the other 2 elements. And again, I also want to have a ready-mix concrete as well. Again, same criteria as before. Nothing will change. Let's say I'm going to use this one. Again, why not? And just for the sake of this demonstration, I'm just going to copy this one and use it as well for the external walls. Of course, in reality, you wouldn't have the same materials for all 3 elements, but just for the sake of it. Once we choose the materials that we want to use, what we have to do is connect those materials with the Grasshopper geometries. So by using this define material right here, I'm just connecting the arrows, basically LCA profile to LCA profile, geometry to geometry. Let's do this 2 more times right here. And again, LCA profile to the geometry and LCA profile to the geometry. If there are any warnings, sometimes we must do. The plugin is coded in such a way that would guide us on what we have to do. And in my case right here, I can see that there's an error, and the error says that I have to specify the thickness. And that's because I've designed my slab and my walls to be as surfaces. So we need to specify the thickness of these elements. I'm going to say 0.3 here for the slab. And I know I have the same error for my external walls. And let's use different thickness for this one. Why not? 0.2. Now that we have created our materials and we have connected them to the corresponding geometries, all that we have to do is classify them and specify where in the building they belong to. So by using a create construction item right here, I'm going to connect again material with material and choose the right class. Same thing. My columns this time. And there we go. My material here, and this is going to be my external wall. And that's basically it. That's the entire modeling process. 3 steps. We first have to assign materials, then we have to connect the materials with the geometries and then classify them. What's left to do now is to run the LCA, the calculation basically, by using the run LCA component right here. And I'm going to connect all these constructions with this input. And there are a couple of more things that need to be done. We have to add an operator here in the run string that will tell the script that it has to run. So this is going to be a toggle, basically a Boolean toggle. Whenever it's on false, it doesn't run. Whenever it's on run, it will run. Sorry, in true, it will run. And then we can also add a button here for the login, because we have to be logged in to be able to get the data from OneClickLCA's database. And one more button to send the data to our software. So by clicking on the button, I have to log in. So give me a second. My data here, I have a really long name, I have to admit. There we go. And now, if I turn this to true, the calculation is running and we should be able to get the results soon. Give it a moment, because my laptop is not made for Rhino or basically NPM software anyway. Okay, so the calculation run, and how we can see our results though. We have this visualize component right here, but whenever we connect the results with it, the 3D model is getting colored, so we can see based on the intensity, and we can choose different ways to visualize our results. So for instance, we can see right here what's the impact from each building element. And if we go now back to our parameters and we start messing with them, we can see that the quantities also update, not the quantities, but the embodied carbon also updates right here. So this is the parametric part. We set our parameters, we connect everything, the materials that we want to use, and we start changing the sizes and everything we have to get our embodied carbon until we reach the point that we want to reach, basically, or until we're satisfied with the shape of our building. Again, this is a very straightforward design, nothing extremely complicated. You can have as many parameters as you want, and they would all work with the plugin. But let's say that we're fine, okay? We have what we have here. We're satisfied with our design, and we're ready to send it into OneClickLCA to have a more advanced overview of our results. First, I need to see what's my area. So I'm just going to use the slab right here to get the area of my design, because we would have to specify this in Carbon Designer, and it's about 830. That's great. How do we send it to OneClickLCA? We just hit on this button that we had before, and it will immediately start the import process. The import process is a step-by-step guided process that we have developed. And once it loads, we'll be able to, I'll guide you through it. I don't know why my internet connection is a bit laggy today, or what? There we go. This is the input process. And what do we have to do here? First things first, we have to choose the project that we are sending our data to. Now, this is my project right here. I named it Industrial Warehouse. So I'm just going to try and find it here. There it is. We can choose whether we want to create a new design or use an existing one. In my case, I'm just going to create a new one and click on continue. And I will name this GH import. We can specify what is the scope and the type of our analysis. So what building elements we will be looking into. In my case, I just want to look into foundations up to enclosure. So I'm just going to remove finishings and other materials. But if you want to, at later stages, you can definitely include finishings as well. We have quite an extensive library of finishings as well. So that will be perfectly fine. We'll click on add. The next step, the software is asking us how we want to combine our data. For more detailed designs, where we have hundreds and thousands of materials, for computational purposes and simplicity, it's good to combine identical data points together. But in my case here, I'm just going to leave it as it is. It's perfectly fine. Click on continue. And then the last part is the matching process. So basically, I'm matching material descriptions with materials from OneClickLCA database. Since we already did this within within Grasshopper, we don't have to do it again. So everything has been identified. You can see right here which material is which, what is the corresponding resource from OneClickLCA, and of course you can change them if you want to. Nothing stopping you from doing that. So now, if we click on continue, we go straight to our results. If there are any mandatory data missing, of course, we get a warning here, and I'm missing my calculation period. So I'm just going to say, I'm going to say for 60 years, and my building area is what it is. I think we found it to be 830. So let's say about 830, that's fine. Now, if we click on save, we can go back to the results right here. And these are the more detailed results from the design that we did in Rhino, in Grasshopper. But this is not the full design, right? It's just basically a couple of materials, nothing special, nothing that will make us find new options. So let's go to Carbon Designer now and how we combine these two together. If we go to Conceptual Design right here and click on Carbon Designer, I'm going to create a bill of materials, and then from that bill of materials, I will merge the two designs together to get a new one. So, as I mentioned before, what information do we need to know? We need to know what building elements we want the bill of materials for, where's the location of our building, or what reference design we'll be using. I'm just using the International Reference Building here. What's the building type, the size of our project, the number of above ground floors, and what's the calculation period. That's all we need to know. If we have more information available, so let's say you want to look into unheated parking lots or take into consideration seismicity, that's perfectly fine as well. But that's all the necessary information you need to have to use Carbon Designer. So I'm just going to click on calculate areas right here. Getting my areas, I can change them if I want to. But since I'm using data from from Grasshopper, I'm fine with as it is now. By clicking on create baseline, what are we going to get? We're going to get the software suggested bill of materials plus the carbon impacts graph based on those materials. So right here, we can see the project carbon breakdown, either by building elements or construction groups. And if we scroll down, we have a list of all the material assemblies that the software has chosen for us. And these are all just average choices, right? Nothing too environmentally friendly or anything like that. We can make changes right here if we want. So for instance, we might say, okay, I don't want to have steel beams in my project. I want to have concrete beams. That's also fine. Any change we might want to make in the assemblies, we can make them here. And whenever we make a change, the quantities update, the structural model updates, and we also get the new results in the graph right here. So let's say that this new option will be how I want my building to look like. And by saving the design to query, I can now go into the material level. Because right now we're working on assemblies. So let's say we have a slab together with the concrete and the reinforcement and everything. From our Grasshopper design, we already had some data on my slabs, on my columns, and on my external walls. So what I'm going to do now here is I'm going to just delete those because I already have them and keep only the remaining. So I'm just going to remove those walls from here. I don't want them. I'm just going to remove the columns as well. That's fine. And I'll also remove my slab. Sorry, delete. Now, everything else, everything that remains is whatever I didn't have before. And what I want to show you, for instance, is what do I mean when I talk about assemblies, is that we're talking about multiple materials grouped together. This is why we don't need high level of detail, because we can use those assemblies to model even the simplest of designs and have actually detailed results within our projects. So when we're done, just click on save. And what I'll do now is I have, this is the design from Grasshopper, the one I used right here, copy design from another, copy data from another design, and I'll name conceptual this. I'll pull the data from this one, and I will keep the existing data, copy all data, merge. And now we have one design that includes both of them. Detailed design with all the necessary information we need to move forward. I know this is not that introductory to OneClickLCA. We didn't go through pretty much most of the user interface stuff, but I hope you did not find it too complicated or anything like that. I couldn't have something else to show you. I don't know if somebody has to ask something or wants to ask something. I'll be more than happy to answer.
Yeah, thanks, thanks Vasilis for that. Yeah, always good to see. I mean, obviously there are various free kind of early stage calculators, and certainly this, you know, the ability, whilst it seems like a lot showing it on a very short webinar, if you get a bit more familiar with the software, I'm sure it's easier than it first appears. But the I know at least some of the people on the call, you're already familiar with Grasshopper, and as I say, having seen on our side OneClickLCA, it is a really powerful ability to be able to, you know, kind of fill in the gaps. You know, we
Yes.
know early stages that it's not going to be super duper accurate, and it doesn't need to be. You just got to get pretty, you know, close-ish to make
Exactly.
a mile off. Yes.
Just have an idea of what you're putting in, and how you can start making some design choices from the very early stages. Like the meaning of this presentation basically was to show you that without even having an actual design, you can have the data that you would have in a full detailed design. That's the idea.
Yeah.
Again, it won't be 100% accurate, as you mentioned, but you'll still be able to get a fairly good idea of how your embodied carbon impacts would look like on a finished project. Yeah,
and I think for me the fascinating thing, and I think something which has come up over and over and over and over again actually with clients is, you know, in these earlier stages, as we try and move analysis for earlier on in the design process, is this discussion about cost. You know, every client is trying to spend as little money as possible as early as possible, because they might be, you know, they might not have planning for it yet, and they might have various other things. But I think what this has shown is, and certainly we've gone on and on and on about this, you know, it's the same with building thermal modeling and stuff. Actually, you know, for a little investment in time, we're not talking about thousands and thousands of pounds to get this work done. It's a small investment in time. And once you've got that model, all being well, as long as you spend a bit of money, all being well, if it proceeds, you've got that baseline model there which you can build on. So you're not having to start from scratch again unless something is completely radically changed. So it's a big investment, but it doesn't take hours and hours and hours and hours of processing to get, you know, considerably closer to the answer, even though it might be a first pass.
Not at all. Actually, experience has shown, at least from customers that I've talked with, this process, I mean, I did this quite fast. That's because I already had the script ready in Grasshopper and everything, but in real actual situations, this process would take less than half a working day to finish it. And that is not, that wouldn't be a significant cost. I would assume, at least that wouldn't be a significant cost, spending less than half a day's work to provide such valuable input. And I believe that the clients would actually appreciate that part. Yeah,
and I guess the other opportunity here is, I don't know, maybe as an architect you're specializing in, you know, warehouses or those kind of, you know, to say the type of building that you use there as an example, you know, you can copy models and rework them. You haven't got to start from scratch. If it's a similar kind of typography or typology, then you can, you know, you haven't got to start from the baseline all the time. And you can build on those. Deborah's got a quick question for you here. So she said, most of our projects start in SketchUp, and I know a lot of architects use SketchUp, and then move to Revit as things get more complicated, or get further on down the design line. Is there any way to extract the data from SketchUp? Just you're inputting it manually into Carbon Designer?
Yes. So if I'm not mistaken, SketchUp can export the data in an IFC format, and we can basically read any IFC file through.
Sorry, that's IFC, is it?
Yes.
That's IFC file. Okay.
Yes. So you can pull this data into Solibri, for instance, or any IFC reader, and then upload them from there to OneClickLCA.
Okay, fine. And that's that gives you the fundamental geometry and volumes and stuff that you've used in those models.
Yes, all the data that you have used in these models will be sent to OneClickLCA. So quantities and material descriptions will be sent to OneClickLCA. And then the mapping process would be done automatically. So for those of you that don't know, when we have data, for instance, in Revit or in any other software, we can actually say what is the description of the material, but to run the embodied carbon calculation, we need to have data, we need to match it with data from OneClickLCA's database. So this is the mapping process that you heard me saying before. And this process, when you upload something to OneClickLCA, is largely done automatically. There might be a few materials that might not be mapped, but the biggest chunk of your projects would be automatically mapped, and then you would have to manually map the remaining 10 or 15% of it, basically.
Yeah, okay, great. So Lucy's got a few questions. She said, thank you for the presentation. Are the Grasshopper scripts and Rhino model template available through the OneClickLCA subscription?
Yes, yes.
They are?
Yes, yes, we can give you the template, that's fine.
Okay, great. And then secondly, is it possible to use with Revit? I think you answered.
Yes, definitely. We have integration with Revit, more advanced than what you've seen in Grasshopper and Rhino, quite a lot of options. And you can also basically do an LCA within Revit with our integration for Revit.
Okay, and then saying, and thirdly, how are the materials loaded? Is there a preloaded spreadsheet, or do you have to create them?
Where are they loaded? In the...
That's a good question. Lucy, you might want to, do you just want to unmute your mic just quickly, just to explain that for us? Just what you're talking about there with regards to that question.
Hi, yeah, no, I've just been looking at kind of carbon calculators and wondered how, you know, when you selected the materials, so like the concrete and external wall, is that like are they preloaded within OneClickLCA, so like a spreadsheet for all those materials, or if not, do you have to create them yourself, or can you?
Basically, we have all these databases of materials within OneClickLCA, within our software, which is this one in the cloud right here. And through the API, we basically send a request and get the data back to the plugins. So they're not locally stored somewhere. Does this answer your question, Lucy?
Yeah, sorry, what did you say, the IPI?
Basically, just to keep it as simple as possible,
Thank you.
through the plugin, we send a request to the cloud based on the information that we've entered, and we get the results back. So there's not an Excel file stored locally somewhere or anything like that.
Yeah, it's a kind of a master database of materials. And can you add?
Right. Okay.
Lucy also asked, can you add your own materials if they're not on the database?
Yes. You can definitely create your own private materials within OneClickLCA, add the impacts, and you'll be able to have them available. You can even create your own private assembly. So you can, let's say you are an architect and you have a very typical facade that you're using all the time, or specific type of wall. You can just model it once within OneClickLCA, and then you'll be able to use it in all of your projects. So you don't have to model it again and again.
Thank you.
No worries.
Jamie's got a question about parametrics. We were obviously just going back to talking about SketchUp. Obviously, you were saying you could use that particular file type and get that into OneClickLCA. But he was saying, you know, there's obviously not a direct link there. So if you parametrically optimize the design, or is there no way to parametrically optimize the design within OneClickLCA if you've got that file? Can you only do that through Grasshopper and kind of Rhino, that parametric?
Yes, the parametric part is only through Grasshopper at the moment.
Okay.
And Rhino, but through Grasshopper basically. Fine.
Okay. And then we've got a question here about IES and OneClickLCA. It might be a bit beyond the kind of the scope of this webinar, but he was saying, or even if you could just describe this, Vasilis, between ISVE, which we know is a kind of a thermal modeling and ventilation modeling, how straightforward is it to do that stuff between OneClickLCA and IES?
So first, let me just, this is our help desk, by the way, and I will share this link in the chat with all of you.
Yeah, that would be great,
I know that people actually use ISV in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
To put it simply, it's as simple as pressing a button and sending it to OneClickLCA. That's basically, you have your model in IS, everything in there, and the process that you press the button, send it to the cloud, and we get into OneClickLCA. The import process is the one we went over before. Yes. Yeah,
I was just going to say, and if correct me if I'm wrong here, you can either, it's certainly in IES, you can put your materials in and then import them into OneClickLCA, or you can import the geometry and then add in OneClickLCA your materials and build ups to the structure. You can add material properties in either software.
I'm not 100% sure about that because I don't personally use IES.
Okay.
But
I know you can do it on the IS side, but obviously you can apply the material properties within OneClickLCA if you just import the geometry.
But if you want to actually send me an email about that, I can get back to you on this one just to make sure that's how it works. Yeah.
Great. Okay. Has anybody got any kind of last minute questions? I'll give you another kind of few moments to do that. And whilst we're doing that, a huge thank you to Vasilis. Thank you very much for that. I certainly learned something. I usually do on these webinars, even though we're hosting them. And it's great to have you jump in, superstar, for doing that. Next week's webinar, we're going to have David Reed presenting. We're going to do a repeat on our heat pumps, always the right choice. There's a lot of talk about heat pump technology and taking over from gas boilers and oil boilers and all those kind of things. But the honest answer is they're not always the right choice. Sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. So David's going to talk you through where to just to be a bit cautious and where to be definitely, kind of press the button when looking at heat pumps for either new buildings or refurb projects. So that's next week's webinar. So do sign up to that one through the MESHWORK. And as I always say, do invite your colleagues onto the MESHWORK, and hopefully they can benefit from that as well. So I think we're just getting thank yous through rather than questions. So a final thank you from me, Vasilis, and we will send the recording this out later on today. We'll put this up on MESHWORK. And are you okay, Vasilis, to share the PowerPoint presentation that you?
Yes, definitely.
So we'll share that PowerPoint presentation as well, and hopefully see you back same time next week. Take care, folks. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you all. Bye.